Hare Acharya Asto Tarasada Sri Srimad Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Acharya Asto Tarasada Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Hare Krishna Ki Jai. Ranjik Oho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhattacharya Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kund Gita Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamunai Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Sum Devotees. All glories to the Sum Devotees. All glories to the Sum Devotees. All glories, Shri Shri Guru and Gurandra. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna everyone. Thank you all for coming. In spite of being a weekday, he came. I'd like to introduce the speaker because many of you may not be familiar with the speaker. His Grace Anuttama Prabhu. He lives in Maryland and he's come to visit us in Columbus and he's going to be our GBC. Beginning 2025.
Who knows what GBC means? Raise your hand if you know what GBC means. It's pretty good on this side. What does it mean?
Governing.
Okay. Who does what? What do they do? Well, just a slight immersion. What does the governing body commission do?
They go
Besides come to Columbus and make you all come on a Tuesday night.
They follow Prabhupada's instructions.
Okay.
And they make
oversight of the international organization. Prabhupada said the GBC body is the ultimate managing authority of this country. A lot of times they introduce like GBC.
Yeah,
everybody goes, Hari Ho! And then you go, what's it mean? And they go,
we can say it's the ultimate managing authority in ISKCON, GBC. We have a whole
as a body.
As a whole body. The B stands for body. So governing body commission. Commissioner. Yeah. Commissioner. Yeah. So Prabhu is an initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of International Society of Krishna Consciousness. He lives in Maryland with his wife Rukmini Devi, who is also a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhu is our ISKCON communication minister. So he sends out all the correspondences whenever there is any, thing that devotees need to know about something. There's an official communication that comes out. He's also involved with many different religions and bringing them and so that we can all unite and under a common banner, common theme, which is God consciousness. So he works with Christian and Muslims, and he's also on the on the board for advisory board for the Religious Freedom Institute. He's also been the chairman of GBC in the past, and he's the GBC for many temples in Northeast, Columbus being one of them. So we'd like to welcome him and with Hari Bol 3 times.
Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol!
Thank you for that very nice introduction. I immediately recognize how intelligent a Prabhu Prem is. Because understanding this is Columbus, which is in Ohio, the seat of Ohio State University. He was very kind to not tell anybody that I was born in Michigan. Thank you. Otherwise, we were at risk of a walkout.
They don't even say the name, they say the state up there.
Yeah, the state up there. Really? Okay.
Campus
Do not ask me where I went to college. I'm not going to
cross
say.
mark an M.
Yeah, down the street, right? I'm surprised they don't just take out the pole and throw it in the garbage or something. Yeah. Anyway, it's nice to be here. This actually is my first visit to Columbus. I learned some things. Prabhupada's coming to speaking at Ohio State University is quite famous. I never realized it was the first college that he actually went to. It was very significant. So, and of course the turnout was amazing, right? 2000. Also didn't know he went to business school.
Yes, the College of Fisher Business School.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to go to college. That's tough enough to go to the business school. That's usually, at least in those days, the business school was not the most spiritually inclined people. Maybe it's different now, but not then. Yeah, and and it's famous turnout, so many people and chanting. I think that really gave Prabhupada a taste and experience, conviction of how college students were very inclined to spiritual life and Krishna consciousness. So that's very significant. This is a very important place, and because of that, for many reasons. So it's a great honor to be here. Maybe just a little bit of a background, because some of you may wonder, well, hey, Malati's done such a great job for so many years. Who's this guy? Why is he sitting here? So one thing, be rest assured, Malati will continue to visit Columbus as she's done for 50 years or something like that, long time. And as long as she's inclined, and as long as the local management board, which I'm sure there will be as long as she's inclined, she's offered to continue as a member of the board of directors. So she'll be visiting regularly and giving her, her input and her advice and her guidance to the devotees that are kind of the legal entity of the temple. So that's very important. So as a little bit of background, Prabhupada started the governing body commission, I think it was 72, like the day before he created the BBT. So those two important entities he put together. And because he, as you remember the history, Prabhupada's Guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, also wanted a governing body to guide his Gaudiya mission. And as we know, there's different degrees of detail there, but after he passed away, they tried to form a body, but it didn't really work. And it pretty much, there was a disagreement. Many people felt we really just need one acharya, some lined up on this one, some lined up behind that one, and then they had some quarrel, and lots of problems came about. And what happened was the Gaudiya Math really kind of divided into separate mats. So the mat in Calcutta is separate from the mat in Mayapur, and like that, so many places. And of course, we try to have good relationships with the different mats as much as possible. But the history is there. So Prabhupada understanding his Guru Maharaj's intention and desire, when he was still, this is 72, Prabhupada left this world 77, so for 5 years, he was there kind of overseeing and managing the governing body commission. Because he envisioned that this really has been, like he started the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in New York City. And it's interesting when Prabhupada, the second place he went was San Francisco, and the devotees in New York were very surprised because they were thinking this is a Lower East Side phenomena. He's our Swami. He's a New York Swami. He's a Lower East Side Swami, and you don't want to go to California. There's funny people out there staying in New York. So they were surprised that Prabhupada was even thinking another city. It was Prabhupada was San Francisco, and then from there, I think from there he went to Montreal, and then so many places. And he, from the very beginning, was instructing all of his disciples, who in those days were very young and inexperienced and untrained. And he was telling them, oh, go start a temple. You go to this, you go to this, you go to this. And one person, we go to Germany, of course, he sent 6 of his disciples, 3 Grasta couples, of which Malati, sure you heard. You probably know more about that than any other yatra in the world. Malati sharing her stories. So she went there with the other 5 devotees. So this is Prabhupada's vision to create an international society. So he created this governing body commission to oversee. And for many years, I think initially there was, I don't know exactly, maybe 7 GBC members. It wasn't so many, something like that number, less than 10. And it gradually grew to maybe 30 or so. And over time, different GBC members were assigned different areas, a little bit spontaneously. So the example I give in appreciation of His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he had, and you all know the geography, he had West India, not a small space. He had East Africa, a bigger space. Russia, a pretty big space, parts of Russia. And just to balance it off, Canada. I think because you could get from, if you went over the North Pole, you could get from Russia to Canada easily, more or less, right? So many professional people here, you know, if your company tells you you're in charge of IT for this area or sales or marketing, whatever, if they told you West Africa, East Africa, West, you would think, what are you, crazy? Right? What kind of system is this? So in the past few years, the GBC's worked on creating what contiguous zones, that's kind of the term that's used, you know, that they're together in some organized manner. So there's 5 in North America. North, which is Canada and a few states in the plains, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and 1 or 2 others. And then the Northeast, which the dividing line is Michigan south to Kentucky, and so Indiana, not Illinois, and then over to Virginia, and then up to Maine. That's kind of the Northeast. And the Southeast, Central, West, like that, 5 zones. So, kind of a gradual process of evolution. So Malati, although most of her temples were, all of that, well, including all of Ohio and all that, were in the east, she officially became the GBC for the Midwest, and then she's decided she wants to retire. So I was one of the many GBCs in the Northeast, and maybe because I'm younger than a lot of them, although I'm not young, a lot of people are retired. So then we're getting to where we want it to be, which is 1 GBC for the Northeast, 1 for the Southeast, like that. So that's the process. And according to ISKCON, the bylaws, which means the governing documents of our individual corporations, either the GBC or the GBC representative needs to be on every corporate structure. Some of you may know we had some problem a few years ago in Brooklyn, New York, and also Long Island, because the legal structures weren't so together. So there was some serious court battles, and we've come out victorious in both of those. We almost lost those 2 temples, important temples. So that's one of the things we also do, is making sure the legal processes are together. We all know Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness will spread by love and trust, but unfortunately this is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So you have to balance those 2 things. Like Ronald Reagan, you may have heard, he famously said when they were negotiating some nuclear disarmament with Gorbachev of Russia, and at one point he was pushing for accountability, and they asked him, they said, don't you trust them? And he said, trust, yet verify. Very wise. So the same way we trust, but we need more verification. So those things are going on. So because we're making this Northeast lined up, so they asked me to also oversee Ohio for a while. So I won't be here for that long. I'm also 70 in November. I'm not a kid. So there's no mandatory retirement for the GBCs. I think that may come at some point, but right now there's not. So anyway, I'll be here for a few years. But another thing that's very important is also, and then we'll get into the verse I want to read. The GBC, the Governing Body Commission, also created another level of structure to assist the local temples and communities, which is called the zonal supervisors, who work under the GBC members. So in the Northeast area, there's 5 zonal supervisors. Hare Krishna, who I think he was here last night, he's come here sometimes. Madan Gopal Prabhu, who's in New Jersey. Madhupati Prabhu, who's in New Jersey. Yugo Kishore Prabhu, who's maybe come here once or twice, right? He's up north.
Yeah.
That state up north.
Yeah.
Don't even know if it's the states, that place up north. In Europe, they used to say the barbarians up north. I don't know if that old here. And one other, Lago Paul Prabhu, who was in St. Louis and just recently. So there'll be zoner supervisors too to help, support the local temples. So that's there too. So that's just a little bit of background of what's happening. And again, to reassure you, Malati will continue to come and visit and participate and offer our guidance. And we're working to try to make the society, because there's a tremendous amount of growth in ISKCON these days. I mean, you're building this beautiful temple here, Washington. Anybody come to Washington, D.C. for the opening? No? Way in the back. Okay, if you get a chance, come. It's a beautiful temple, Washington, D.C. Just opened this year, March of this year. Baltimore just 5 or so years ago. Tawako, soon to become Parsippany new temple. Naperville just opened a new temple. You were in Naperville for the opening?
Not for the opening, just
You've
last
been visited? Yeah, and that's just the initial structure.
Yeah.
They're doing like I think you're gonna do, they had to,
The
face
facade
everything.
and
Yeah, it's a beautiful facility. So there's a lot of growth. So, as growth comes, just like when you have a child, right? At first all you need is a baby crib, right? Then you need all kinds of toys. Then you need a playpen, right? Then you need a playroom, right? Then you need a new car. There's a little gap there. But, you need more and more things, right? So as the society grows, we're also needing more structure. Okay, any questions on that? Just pray, any questions? Okay. All right, so I wanted to read, this is a very famous verse, and I'll read part of the purport. This is from the Nectar of Instruction, Upadeshamrita. Text 4. Some of you probably taken seminars on this verse, so it's a very important one. Dadati pratigrinati guyam akyati prichati bhungte bojayate chaiva shadvidham pritilakshanam. Used to be a publication called Pritilakshanam. Anybody remember reading that ever? That was one of the first things in this talk about devotee care. So translation. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad, and offering prasad are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. And I read part of the purport, read about 2 pages long purport, 4 or 5 pages long, no longer than that, 6, 7, 8. Srila Prabhupada writes, in this verse, Srila Rupa Goswami explains how to perform devotional activities in the association of other devotees. There are 6 kinds of activities. 1, giving charity to devotees. 2, accepting from the devotees whatever they may offer in return. 3, opening one's mind to devotees. 4, inquiring from them about the confidential service of the Lord. 5, honoring prasadam, or spiritual food given by the devotees. And 6, feeding the devotees with prasad. An experienced devotee explains, and an inexperienced devotee learns from him. This is Guyam Atyati Prichati. And I'll move on a little bit further in the purport. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness has been established to facilitate these 6 kinds of loving exchanges between devotees. So if anyone ever asks you, why was this formed? To facilitate the 6 loving exchanges between devotees. This society was started single-handedly. There's somebody out there?
No, he's connecting the
Just to display the.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So you can turn it this way.
Okay, now I'm on, anyway, you have to look for it. The society was started single-handedly, but because people are coming forward and experiencing the give and take policy, the society is now expanding all over the world. We're glad that people are donating very liberally to the development of the society's activities, and people are also eagerly accepting whatever humble contribution we're giving them in the shape of books and magazines dealing strictly with the subject matter of Krishna consciousness. We sometimes hold Hare Krishna festivals and invite life members and friends to participate in the feasting by accepting prasadam. Although most of our members come from the higher rungs of society, they nonetheless come and take whatever little prasad we're able to offer them. Sometimes the members and supporters inquire very confidentially about the methods of performing devotional service, and we try to explain this. In this way, our society is successfully spreading all over the world, and the intelligentsia of all countries is gradually appreciating our Krishna conscious activities. The life of the Krishna conscious society is nourished by these 6 types of loving exchanges among members. Therefore, people must be given the chance to associate with the devotees of ISKCON, because simply by reciprocating in the 6 ways mentioned above, an ordinary man can fully revive his dormant Krishna consciousness. John, so we'll stop there. You probably caught up on the last line, right?
Somewhere in between.
Okay. So go back, we can read the translation together. How's that? All your hard work. Okay, so let's say together. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasad, offering prasad,
are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee.
devotee and another. Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Vishnu Hare Krishna Stagnation and Muktananta Samhita. So sometimes we may think that we are the Columbus Society for Krishna Consciousness, or I live in a town called Rockville. The Rockville Society for Krishna Consciousness, or the Detroit Society for Krishna Consciousness, or the old former hippie Society for Krishna Consciousness, or the Telugu Society for Krishna Consciousness, or the Bengali Society for Krishna Consciousness, or the West African Society for Krishna, whatever. But we're not. By the design of Prabhupada, we're the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And it's interesting because if you look at some of the early literature and things that Prabhupada put together, he taught, I think in the first flyer that he passed out in Butler, Pennsylvania, I remember, which has become famous for some other reason. Maybe that'll tie in. Eventually people will hear about Butler and then they'll realize, oh, Prabhupada was there. I think in that very first flyer, he mentioned something like centers all around the world. It was either, I'm pretty sure, I'll check on that later, it was either that or something, right? There were no centers all around the world. But that was, you could say they talk these days about vision statements. Prabhupada had a vision statement. Of course, ultimately, Lord Chaitanya, centuries ago, said, right, my name will be heard in every town and village. So Prabhupada had this vision, and he created the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And as he explains here in this important purport, that the whole purpose of it was to facilitate loving exchanges between devotees so that we could all advance in our Krishna consciousness. So this is the vision of our founder Charya and of the whole Vaishnava teaching, is that, as we know, we all have an eternal relationship with Krishna. And that's become checked. We've forgotten that relationship and we're relating to so many different things. And our society is meant to really help people reawaken their Krishna consciousness. It's described in many places. It's natural. We have this existing relationship, and ISKCON is meant to help reawaken that. So we have this vision that everyone should have the opportunity for advancing in their spiritual life. Prabhupada, in his 7 purposes, he talked about another analysis of ISKCON. He says the first purpose is to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large. And then he goes on and says to check the imbalance of values and to promote real peace and unity in the world. And we all know, in this day and age, there's so little peace. I mean, if you have a property in Florida right now, there is no peace. If you owned a property in North Carolina, I was reading again today, they say, literally, it's not just something made up by the media. There literally are towns that do not exist anymore. So devotees, we hear that, we feel compassion, and we also understand that's just the nature of this world. Where someone without any real spiritual foundation may think, that it's fearful for them, and a lot of times people don't want to think about it. Maybe they'll try to offer some charity, which is very nice and should be done, but they don't really want to kind of think about the reality. It might happen here in some way or shape, right? I think somebody today was saying about how we're fortunate in the Midwest because we don't have hurricanes. I was saying, again, I grew up in this area. We never talked about hurricanes. We talked about tornadoes, right? And even we talked about ice storms, right? And how many 70 cars in a pileup on Highway 70 or whatever like that. So, we have our fair share. Of course, right? Pollution and so many things like that. So, this temple community that you're so wonderful group of devotees, and also the temple that's existing downtown and the new structure that's coming up on 55 acres. I was amazed. I was looking. It goes how far? He took me there yesterday. He's like, way over there, way over there. I had an uncle that had a dairy farm. He didn't take care of the cows the way they should, but his whole farm was 160 acres. Used to be farmers could have 100, 150 acres, and before that, so 55 acres, that's a lot of land. A lot of land. So this is very much a part, and an important part, as you mentioned, you're all important, also the Prabhupada was here, that part of this international community. And here's explained how we can actually make sure we're successful. Just like in the modern society, oftentimes they'll talk about how's the country doing, right? What's the first thing they measure when they say, how's your country doing?
Economy.
GDP.
Yeah, the GDP, right? GNP, right? Gross National Product, or they changed the terms? Something like that, whatever, right?
Gross domestic.
Gross domestic product. Okay. So how much your output is. Doesn't matter if 1% is consuming 90%, or the suicide rate, the depression rate, none of that matters, just how much are you producing, right? I think even India a few years ago, I remember when I first came, they had like some billboards, they don't have these anymore, I don't think, but they had like a picture of a chicken. And it was in English, so I could understand, it said, produce more. Anybody remember those? Produce more, right, a Western influence. So, of course, we need economic development is there, it's one of the important pillars of life, but there's this tendency to measure everything by our external output, and here Prabhupada is explaining that as devotees, we need to keep in mind that what really matters is our cultivation of our Krishna consciousness and our relationships with devotees, and that's actually our success. Not only is it our success, it promotes other success. As Prabhupada said many, many times, as you've all heard, he said, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate after I'm gone. He told that to his disciples. And sometimes, we may think, as I mentioned earlier, Prabhupada said love and trust. So I remember Bandit Rai Maharaj, he had a father who was a businessman, and when he was first managing, he's at GBC in the West Coast, now it's Sannyasi. And he's told this story a bunch of times when his father, as I mentioned, was some kind of businessman. He was asking him, how do you run your society? And he told him, love and trust. And he said, you mean you can't hire, you can't fire? And he was shocked, He said, it's not possible. So love and trust is there. That's the ethic that Prabhupada gave us. And so then we would think, okay, is it easy? Actually, it's very difficult. I have some friends who are Catholic, not monks, but priests, Catholic priests. So the men, like, they live in a house, like an ashram. The ladies live in a house. And one priest was explaining to my wife, actually, that it's much harder for the women's, where the nuns are, it's much harder for them to get along. And I was thinking, well, I'm really surprised. I remember that. I'm really surprised by it. Why would it be harder for the women? The men seem to quarrel all the time. And he said, because the men, they just ignore each other. The women have to get along. The relationships are more important. He was talking about how, some man will come, some priest will come down and read the morning paper and make breakfast and won't say a thing to the person next to him. He was explaining his experience. But he was a lifelong priest, so certainly was committed to it. But he gave that example that developing love and trust is harder than just ignoring each other. It's hard. It's actually hard work. It's very hard work. Especially if we have long-standing relationships, especially if we're trying to do something together. If we're trying to work together to try to achieve something. Like if you're a kid, it's kind of easy to go on with your brother or your sister if you have separate bedrooms and separate bathrooms and separate class times and all of that, right? He goes out and she comes in. It's easy. You along with your brother? Yeah, and she's shaking her head. She knows the guy I'm talking about. You along with your brother? Yeah, no problem, right? But then they put you in the back of the family van for vacation for a week. That's the test. That's a real test, She says, I can pull over and use the restroom now, and he's like 5 miles down. He wants to pull over. It's a big challenge. It's like a few years ago, this expression, and the kids would say, to the parents, are we having fun yet? I've heard we're supposed to be having fun. Are we having fun yet? So this, cooperating together, it's not an easy thing. We can see, again, the Gaudiya Math, historically, some lack of cooperation, and it became a big problem. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge for us, even philosophically. There's a lot of interest in Buddhism these days. It's interesting because they're simultaneously very much emphasize compassion, but then there's no sense of personal identity. And ultimately you lose your identity. We had a friend who was a professor of Buddhist studies. When I lived in Colorado, we had him over for prasadam one night. We're having a little philosophical discussion. So we asked him, we said, you're Buddhist, right? Yeah, obviously. And so you believe in reincarnation? Yes. I said, but you don't believe in the soul? Yes. So what's reincarnating? We asked him that. And his answer, because this is literally his answer, he's a professor at the University of Colorado in Buddhist studies and a practicing Buddhist. And his answer, when we said, what's reincarnating? He said, that's a very good question. That was his answer. So, I'm sure there's some deep theological, discussions there and all of that. But there's no sense of the individuality of the soul. In our tradition, we understand that we're individual spiritual beings, part and parcel of Krishna. We have a relationship with Krishna. And the spiritual realm means everything is centered around Krishna. Probably gives an example we've all heard and probably taught many times. If there's a pond of water, you throw so many rocks in. If they have a different center, then the waves conflict. But if they have the same center, small rock, big rock, round rock, square rock, brown, black, red, purple, green, doesn't matter. They're all in concentric circles. So we're living in the world of our consciousness is such that we still tend to see even like our senses, right? If I was to ask anybody in this room, what's the center of the room? And if you look around, the wall's behind me and this wall's over here and you're in front of me and I'm in the center, isn't it? And you're in the center, but your center's different than my center because your senses tell us that, isn't it? So we're trying to purify our senses so we realize that actually we're not in the center. Krishna's in the center. And when Krishna's the center, then we can cooperate. When Krishna's not the center, then we can't cooperate so well. And also when we have a shared purpose of pleasing Krishna, then we can cooperate. So to the extent that we're thinking, whatever, the prasadam's for me, or the temple's for me, or the kirtan's for me, or this is for me. To whatever extent that's there, then there's going to be conflict. Just like I had a kind of a cultural shock a few years ago. I was in Russia. I can't go there now, but I was in Russia a few years ago. And, we all live in America. Probably some of you were born here, some of you not. But, it's a nice country in many ways. It has a lot of good things going for it. We kind of like to think about the beacon of freedom to the world and the economic driver of the world commerce and like that. So I was speaking with a Russian friend, devotee friend, a bunch of us walking around Moscow. It was a big painting of a big general on the wall. So I started asking her about Russian history. And then she said, well, you know what we learn about American history? I said, no, what do you learn about American history? And I was thinking, you helped Russia because they actually had a lot more deaths than Americans did with World War II. But, you helped win World War II and, Thomas Jefferson and the Constitution and high education, all the different things I learned. She said, oh, we learned two things. I said, what's that? She said, you killed the natives and you enslaved the blacks. And I was thinking about it. It's actually the history of the country. I was recently in somewhere, well maybe even here. Ohio River. Where's the word Ohio come from? It's not French, it's not German, it's not British, it's Native American, right? And when I was a kid, we went on the Manistee River, right? Michigan is another, that place up there that we won't mention. Native American name. Ottawa, right, in Canada, right? So, and where are all those people? They're gone. They were basically pushed out of the way. And and I just recently been reading. I just finished reading an autobiography of Frederick Douglass, who was a African black man who was enslaved and then escaped, and his whole story and how he was mistreated. It's like a really kind of a horrible history. Many good things, but otherwise horrible. And so we're meant to be philosophical and stuff. Well, why was that? Well, we pushed off the Indians natives, because it's for us to grab. And you can slave other people because it's for us to exploit. And you can use people in relationships because the goal is to get ahead, isn't it? So to whatever extent we're influenced by those kind of ideas or philosophies, we can't be pure-hearted and we can't really cooperate. We'll cooperate limitedly, isn't it? Like, again, I'm a lot older than everybody here, but when I grew up, like on television, there was all the not all, but some of my favorite TV shows were about World War II, which had just ended, and Americans fighting with the Germans, but they were becoming close friends at that point in time. And the Russians, who they fought with, were now becoming enemies. They were our allies just a few years ago, right? It's always changing like that. So it's the nature of this world. So we're trying to change that in our consciousness and the way we interact with other people by actually learning how to cooperate on a much deeper and a much higher level. And so we say, and Prabhupada, our acharyas teach us that we're persons, Krishna's a person, we're not nothing reincarnating. And what we really need to try to do is to clean our heart. And that when we cleanse our hearts, then we can have this kind of level of understanding and cooperation. So how do we do that? That's through bhakti. That's what we're all trying to practice together. We chant, we have prasadi, we come together, associate with devotees. So we can develop that realization of my actual position is to be a servant of Krishna and a servant of each other. And when we actually understand that, then all the conflicts, they go down and actually go away. Because we have that shared understanding of a shared purpose. So it's important for all of us here. I mean, I know I toured the temple, you've got a big responsibility, you've got a big commitment, big obligation, big commitment to Krishna, and he'll help and make sure that it's successful if we're cooperative. And if we're not cooperative, then sometimes he teaches us lessons in painful ways. You probably all had that experience sometimes in you. You're thinking you're doing some nice service for Krishna, but maybe you're not doing it as nice a way as possible, and he stops all forward progress. Because more important for him than the progress is you learn the lesson, how to be more Krishna conscious. So, Prabhupada gave us the example we mentioned here about he started Krishna conscious single-handedly. He had no money, he had no institution, he was old, he didn't know anybody here. If any of you are saying, there's a beautiful video, which if you haven't seen it, please take a look. 2016, we had a 50th anniversary event at Harvard University. Not as famous as Ohio State, but it's another university. It's for the East. If you haven't heard of it, you can look it up. We started a couple of years before Ohio State. I don't remember that year. But we had a 15th anniversary of Krishna conscious coming west. There was one scholar, Thomas Hopkins, who passed away a year or two ago. He gave the keynote address. And in this keynote, you can look it up. If you just Google Harvard ISKCON 50th anniversary, it'll come up. It's a 17-minute film about that. You want the 17-minute one, not the 3-minute one. That's just a short little news clip from the Desire Tree or something. But Thomas Hopkins, in the same room that Prabhupada spoke in 50 years before at Harvard. And this one Muslim scholar who was a great fan of Srila Prabhupada, he passed away also a couple of years ago, Shani Kirmani. He was saying, he sat right over there and he did this and he did that, was explaining the whole thing. And then Tom Hopkins spoke and he said, if we're going to talk about the contributions of Prabhupada, he said, I'm a historian of religion. As a historian, we make comparisons. He said, if you look at it actually, and I'm paraphrasing, this is very close, you can look and check on the video. This is not a Hare Krishna devotee, it's a professor of religion, scholar, elderly scholar. He said, if you look at Prabhupada's contribution, there's only two people in history you can compare him to. Only two people. Anybody guess who those two people are? Jesus and Muhammad. He said this at Harvard University, Sperry Room, the center of the Divinity School at Harvard University. He said the only people you can really compare Prabhupada to is Jesus and Muhammad. He said actually, it's not really comparison. He said because Jesus was in his own country. He had people his own age to help him in his own language and culture to start his movement. So Muhammad, in his own country, his own culture, his own language, and he had his family and friends to help him. Prabhupada was in a different country, different culture, different language, with no one to help him. So in that sense, there's no comparison. Devotees were sitting in the room like with our mouths open, thinking like, Okay, we might get away with saying something like that. How do you say that? It's like, when you say it, it carries a lot of weight, right? Like, a lot of cross. Just like if you ask any man in the audience, who's the most beautiful woman in the world, they're all going to say, my wife. Of course, we don't know that, right? Okay. So somebody might ask, who's the greatest spiritual teacher? Ours, right? If you're a Methodist, you're going to say John Wesley, or if you're this or that, you're going to pick your quote unquote your guy. This is an outside scholar looking at the whole history of religion in modern times, saying Prabhupada's contribution is unique. So it really is unique. And I think almost all of you came from India, or some of you were born next generation, but very few people came from India to the United States looking for God, isn't it? But you all got trapped, right? I mean, the history, a lot of young people, especially, and probably a similar thing with the house these days. A lot of like the young Indian students, right? They're away from home, they're lonely, they don't know who to talk to, and the food's good. Right? They relate to the food. Okay, Bhagavad Gita, I've heard of that before, and they keep coming for the food because they're culturally comfortable. And next thing you know, the philosophy starts making sense. And then they start chanting. And the next thing you know, they go home and their mother's like, what happened to you? We sent you there to make money, not to find God. What went wrong, right? And then he makes the mother a devotee and the father a devotee and the grandfather. It's quite interesting how that works. So this is really Prabhupada's potency. And all of us were carrying on Prabhupada's legacy. And, Prabhupada said, at least once, he said, I have one disease, I can't think small. Right? And I think if anyone comes and visits your new temple, you should say, well, we picked up this mood of Prabhupada. Right? So we say, this is a big place. Yes, because Prabhupada said we can't think small. So you're taking on a big challenge. Cooperatively, you'll be very successful. But be very careful and keep that cooperative spirit. And cooperative spirit, I work with a few different communities, and it's not always easy. Sometimes it's really, really hard. And part of it kind of drawing from my communications training, and then we'll stop and see if there's some questions. We talk in communications about understanding the needs, interests, and concerns of the other person. So, we may think that prasadam should be medium hot, right? And we can't understand people that want it really hot, right? Or mild, isn't it? My wife tells a story when she was with Prabhupada traveling in India, they stayed at some life member's home. I can't remember exactly where, but anyway, it was some, the tradition there was hot. And the prasadam they could barely eat it. So somehow they got the message to the cook, the wife of the house, household made arrangements. So they toned down the chilies a little bit. And Rukmini explains they still couldn't eat it. It was so hot. And the owner, or the head of the household, he was there maybe at the same time, a little after. He tasted the same prasadam. They couldn't barely eat. And she said he almost spit it out. He said, there's no taste. No taste. Because there was not enough chili. She said they could barely, they're all getting sick because it was so hot. So we see things from our own perspective. We tend to think, somebody may, like I was just in New Vrindavan. Okay, and I walk in the entranceway and there's a sign. You were there. Put your shoes in the shoe rack. Shoe rack's empty. Shoe rack's empty. The floor's full of shoes. And I'm thinking, what's the matter with these people? And somebody else walks in, slips off their shoes in a hurry, rushes in to see the deities, and they're looking at me like, what's wrong with you? You're just standing here meditating on feet. And Krishna's next door. What are you worried about all these details for? And I'm thinking, what are you doing rushing in? What kind of service can you do? You can't follow the sign. So we have different perceptions of things. One person likes hot prasadam, cool. So we should try to keep that in mind. Because the tendency is to think, I'm right, and if you have a different opinion, you must be wrong. And sometimes from there, it goes even worse. You're not only wrong, it's my duty to tell you you're wrong. Right? And then it gets even worse because sometimes it's, Prabhu, you've been here for 22 years. Please remember, I came 3 hours before you did. I'm senior. It's my duty to inform you. These things don't lead to cooperation, right? They lead so we should try to think. When we talk about needs, interests, and concerns, so try to understand what are the needs, interests, and concerns of other people, and how we can, like they say, the modern expression, how we can think win-win. How can everyone benefit from this? How can I hear? You have a different viewpoint than I do. You are seeing something here that I'm not seeing. Instead of assuming you're wrong or you're not informed or you just don't have the experience or the wisdom or the Krishna consciousness that I have, to instead kind of change that. Like, let me try to understand, how are you seeing this? What are you seeing here? We're disagreeing on something. What are you seeing here that I'm not seeing? Help me understand that. And we create that, if we create that kind of, if we carefully create that kind of mood and environment, amongst the directors, among the community, among the, department heads, this and that. Especially going from the small temple downtown, in a year, you're going to have a big place. There's going to be a lot of questions to ask and a lot of answers to find. And a lot of people are going to want to say, well, like I could say, well, I was raised in the Denver temple, we do it this way. Somebody else says, no, in Juhu, Mumbai, we do it this way. Somebody else says, no, Chapati, we did it that way. Somebody else says, no, LA. Somebody else says, very common, no, my grandmother said. So the answer is, well, that's your grandmother. She's not my grandmother, right? And I'm very glad she changes. So we need to kind of step back. And that's, we know, I mean, I live in Washington, D.C. That's such a big problem these days. People can't listen to each other. It's true. I mean, they talk about it. I mean, you read things like, well, with the election, how's it, and there's such opposite poles because they're hearing completely different sources. The same event, it's just, you described it, it's too hot, no, it's too mild, without really trying to talk. So among ourselves, we should definitely make that effort, especially over the next year. Make sure if there's some differences of opinion or as we're forming decisions, to always ask, well, how does it look from this perspective? How does it look from that perspective? Like, anybody here, raise your hand if you're 5'10" or taller. Raise your hand. There's a few of us, okay. So how tall are you in the back? You're quite tall. 6 foot. So most of you don't know. I'll let you in a little secret that he and I know. When we walk in your homes, we see what's on the top of your refrigerator. Isn't it true? Sometimes it is so embarrassing. You want to say, well, okay, whose house is this? Can I talk to you privately? Because nobody sees up there. I'm exaggerating, but it's true. A lot of times the refrigerator is like filthy. The whole house is spotless. You look on the top of the refrigerator, because they don't see it. They don't see it. So we have to try to see from other people's perspectives within our community. And certainly in terms of outreach and other people. I remember years ago, I was in Denver for 17 years before I moved to Washington, D.C. And sometimes we go out and give classes. I remember going one time, like the Denver Seminary someplace, and we had kind of like a standard explanation. And relating mostly in those days to the Christian audience, nominally Christian at least. And I would kind of say things like, well, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains he's the Father, universal Father, which is like in the Bible is emphasized just like it's a warm term, he's the Father. But I would notice 10% of the people would cringe. When you said God's the Father, they would cringe. Because their relationship with the Father was so bad. You try to give her a comparison, he's like your Father. They're like, your God is like my Father? I don't want anything to do with it. And it's kind of funny, but it's sad too. So Bhakti Tirthamaj gave a beautiful explanation. I heard it once, but maybe many times. He said, our job as devotees, teachers, preachers, outreach to people, is to remove the obstacles between them and Krishna. So for one person, the obstacle is chilies. Less chilies, then they'll come more often. You know? Some of the obstacle, I met a young woman in Denver at the temple there about 2 years ago. I was visiting for some conference. That's where I joined. I was there for, I mentioned 17 years, and I went for the Sunday feast. And there was one young woman in mid-20s or so. She was dancing and chanting so ecstatically, just really deeply into it. So after the talk, there happened to be a place next to her there. So I sat down on the bench next to her, started talking. And I mentioned, I said, you really seem to love kirtan, you know? And she said, yeah, I've been coming for 6 months and I love it. It's just so wonderful, so ecstatic. So I just said the kind of natural devotee thing. I said, well, you know, we understand that Krishna is not different from his name. The potency of God is in the name. She said, I don't believe in God. Really, like strong like that. I was shocked. I was speechless. I didn't know what to say next. But here's a person who loves kirtan, loves to come to the temple. I mean, she's in front of the deities. She's hearing the philosophy, but she doesn't believe in God. So I could have said, well, I'm here to defeat you. Krishna wants me to defeat you. You have to accept that he's God, or you can't make it. There is a God, or else that's not going to help her, is it? Better I just encourage her, keep coming, I just met her, so I'm not so important in her life, but whatever. Encourage her, keep coming, keep chanting. It's so nice that you appreciate it so much, and just avoid. Other people, they just want prasadam. I mean, really. Some people, they just want to dance. Some people, they just want to study the philosophy. I remember I was on traveling Sankirtan when I was a young brahmachari with one devotee. We were on for a couple of weeks. I read 7 books in 2 weeks because he never talked to me. He would, like, I was driving, he would get out of the van and go to some books. He'd jump back in the van and immediately open his book. I'm looking at him like, don't you want to, how'd you do? You meet any nice people? And he's like, So I had no choice but to read. So he just wants to read. So if I try to talk to him all the time, I'm blocking his Krishna consciousness. So we have to a little bit kind of mold our mood and our roots are deep, but be flexible enough to attract people, different types of people, different ways to Krishna, and within our own community. I mean, we know, I don't know all of you very well at all, but generally, there's a community where somebody is really serious about chanting, but they're not very friendly, right? And there's someone else who works really, really hard. They'll do service in a minute, they'll stay late, they'll clean up, but they don't like to read the philosophy very much. Somebody else loves the deities, right? But don't ask me to talk to anybody about Krishna. Somebody else loves to go out and preach, but there's no way I'm going to put my shoes on the shoe rack. Right? So one way we can react is, well, I can follow his example and not put my shoes in the shoe rack. And I can follow her example and not be friendly. And we have that choice because we all have really, good qualities, and we all have some things we need some work on. So it's our choice. Do I emulate, follow the footsteps of the positive things that I see? Or do I allow my mind to be critical or use that as an excuse to kind of slow down the other things? So those are some of the challenges of living in a community. Because we all know, every community has people like that. Somebody that really, really works hard, and their sadhana is not so good. But they love to preach, but they don't put their shoes in the ring. Whatever it is, there's really good here. So we should appreciate the good qualities amongst the devotees within the community, and be patient and tolerant, and don't meditate on wherever they need to improve, because we all need to improve. And this way, really become the family that Prabhupada's talking about here, that Rupa Goswami's talking about here. We can support each other. We can give charity, service to each other, affection to each other. We can lift up each other. Because Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj on this, and with this he used to say, and he wrote some things about this, we should always think, and Malati probably said this because she was close to Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, we should always think that the devotees I'm with today, they could be the person who's with me the last minutes or days of my life. How much I need those people to be with me to help me think about Krishna. So, if I'm I'm in the hospital, I'm having trouble, and somebody walks in who's a devotee that maybe I don't have the greatest relationship with, I'm very, very happy to see them. Isn't it? And whatever, they never put their shoes on the rack a day in their life. I don't care now. I'm not going to let that get between us. So we should kind of think like that. And remember how grateful we are and appreciative. And then, as Prabhupada described, who was the Greek teacher about bundle of sticks? Who was that?
Aristotle.
Was it?
Aristotle.
No, not Aristotle. I remember the name.
Socrates.
Not Socrates. Okay, you all remember. But the bundle of sticks, like the father and teaches his children, can you break this bundle? There's a bunch of sticks tied together, and they all tried, they couldn't break it. Prabhupada retold us, it's a famous kind of a Greek story, teaching. But then they took out one at a time and broke them. So we're like that. We're not very strong. We're not very strong. All of us has some struggle or some temptation or some challenge that maybe for us is difficult. There's one devotee in Baltimore, he moved to Houston now. He was a medical student in the Caribbean someplace. He got accepted there in medical school. And he's told me this story a few times. The island he was at was famous for drinking, intoxication, gambling, and I think prostitution, like all four of the no's. And people went there to do those things. So here he's in medical school in the midst of all that. But he explained he had a Muslim woman friend, a Catholic friend himself, and I can't remember either a Sikh or a Christian. Maybe Christian Catholic. And all of them knew, you're dedicated to your religion, I'm dedicated to mine. We're all surrounded by this crazy environment. And, the Muslim woman gave strength to the, Vaishnava, prabhu. You can't do that, it's against your principles. And he's supporting her. This Ramadan must be tough right now in a hot climate. So, and they're all really good friends. I went to his wedding, and this Muslim lady was there. Nobody else knew her. But they helped each other get through the tough times. What to speak amongst the Vaishnava community. So we should really try to see like that. I need you to help me make progress in spiritual life, and what can I do to help you make progress? And we know the back of it all, that's the best way to satisfy Prabhupada, and the best way to satisfy Krishna, to really help each other like that.
Is it Krishna Balram Prabhu?
The devotee? No. I've known him since he was a kid, so I can't remember his initiated name. No, not him. It's Houston. He was in Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, bundle of sticks, we have to be together, stay together, no matter what. Okay. So we'll take any questions or comments. And first, I really appreciate everybody coming. I know it's a Wednesday night, or Tuesday night, even worse. You all came. Who made the prashadam? Because I know the real reason everybody came tonight, so that's what I appreciate you for that. So maybe it's a few minutes. We have a few minutes of questions or anything at all. Questions, comments. Your baby is really well behaved, by the way. Yeah. I saw her father. It's a girl or boy? It's a boy. I saw his father took him outside a few times. It's because the father wanted to go make noise. It wasn't the baby. No, really, a lot of times kids, the minute you walk in, they start communicating. They start communicating. Yeah. Any questions or comments?
No, sir.
Or my wife likes to say reflections. Any reflections you'd like to share?
Yeah. So the reflection or question?
Either way, as you like. He'll go first, then you.
Yeah. So now, if I'm like anybody else in the congregation, so I try for that relationship. If somebody's in the management, so what is the boiling point? How long it tolerates?
What is the boiling point?
How boiling point?
This question is, if I'm in relationship with the people in management, what's the boiling point? Depends if you're on the moon or on the earth, or you're in
cut-off point where we have to intervene, saying that otherwise that will continue. So if you're the manager, you're in communications part.
As a manager or as a member under the manager?
Manager. How do you deal with this personally?
Well, I mean, the biblical thing comes to mind right away. They went to Jesus one time. Somebody told me, said, teacher or rabbi, I've forgiven this man 7 times. How many times do I have to forgive him? You know what his answer was? He said 7 times 70. 7 times 70. And of course, we have Krishna's example, right? Shishupala's mother knew that. She said, please forgive him. So it was 100 times?
100 times complete.
So those are like our acharyas. So in general, I mean, patience and tolerance, right? Those are the qualities that were supposed to work. And I think that a lot of it is just making sure people are in what's their right situation. Like I'm too active of a person. I wouldn't be very good at deity worship. You told me to worship the deities. You're the main pujari. I'd really struggle with that. And somebody else would say, well, you have to go out on book distribution. Some people really struggle with that. Or you have to clean the temple or whatever. We should try to make sure we're engaging people according to their propensities. And otherwise, it gets a little kind of detailed. I mean, some people, the best thing, you have to have a private conversation with them and really, try to understand what's bothering them, what's difficult.
It's a beautiful point, bro. So based on their propensity, if you tell them, if they get, no, this is what I would like to do, but we know they're good at something else, so they can excel. But if they don't want to do, that's a challenge.
Yeah. I think, too, an important thing for the managers, daughters, and members, ultimately, Krishna is working to bring everybody back home. And not that this is the rule all the time, but sometimes the manager, the leaders, you just have to tolerate a situation because Krishna's working on it. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen that situation with coworkers or yourself or with your spouse or with kids. Sometimes people just can't hear something, and then something happens, and then they're ready to hear. I remember very clearly when I was a president of Denver, there were some devotees I had such a good relationship with that there was a problem, I could tell them on the spot. You just made this mistake, you did this wrong, you upset somebody. Other people, I would have to wait, like catch them at the right moment. And I can remember some people, just probably because of my shortcoming, literally weeks, if not months, waiting for the opportunity to point certain things out to them when they would be receptive. We talk about that in communications, that if there's a conversation going on, let's say you and I are talking, okay, and I'm doing the talking, talk. Who's in control of the conversation, of the communication? If I'm doing all the talking, who's in control? You would think me, right? But if he's not listening, right, there's zero communications. Yeah, like you can have the most powerful radio broadcasting network in the world, isn't it? But if nobody tunes into your, dial, whatever, who cares? There's no communications. So sometimes we kind of think, if I speak louder, if I quote more Shastra, if I whatever, you have to hear. No, I'm not hearing. So how do we get people to hear? And that's what comes in. We talk about trying to understand the needs, interests, and concerns of others. We have a simple example in communications course. Let's say you're going to the police department. You need to get permission from the police. And you say, dear Captain Smith, please give permission. You see, this is a wonderful opportunity to bring Lord Jagannath, the Lord of the universe, down the street to offer his benediction to all the conditioned souls. In addition to that, my Guru Maharaj will be very pleased for me. And the temple president said, if I actually get permission from you, I'm going to get a plate of Mahaprasada for the whole week. Have I convinced that police officer to give me permission? No. What if I say, well, sir, this is a very wonderful cultural event to promote peace amongst the citizens of the city, and we've hired extra security to make sure that it's safe, and we've looked over we've reviewed to understand the maps. We're going to try to time this so that we don't interrupt the traffic and cause any difficulties. Here's the card, here's how you can contact us. Our priorities are safety and security. We're here to find out what we can do best for you. He's like, wow, a cooperative citizen. What a change of pace. How can I help you? All because you explained it. You didn't lie. Those things, we aligned with those values, but you present it in a way that he can hear. So sometimes that's easier said than done, but to try to understand what's important for others, explain it to them in that way. Okay. Oh, she left.
Yeah, she is.
Oh my gosh. She was so frustrated I didn't answer her question. Was she nearby? Because she was like waving her hand like
I know,
anything.
but she said she has to leave. She just told me.
Oh, she has to leave. Okay, so next time I come, tell her, hold that question. Maybe just one more, then we'll quit. Who should we go?
No, can,
Good.
you can.
Okay.
So thank you, bro, for the wonderful class. So I just want to understand, like it was just kind of bothering me for a while. Like we hear all these lectures, right? Like how to have love, trust, cooperation, how to implement this and that. And it's all inflow coming in, right? All these lectures. But when it comes to the implementation or the execution, we always want to implement it on other person, right? We always think that, oh, I know everything.
Could you hear that in the back? Yeah.
So we always think that I know everything
Yes.
and I'm always right, and that person has to work on him, right? So how we can reflect upon us that I have a shortcoming, I have to work on me, not to look at other person.
That's a great question. Yeah, sometimes we're sitting listening to a class and, about humility, we're thinking, I hope she's listening. Controlling anger. Oh, he's talking about Vishnu now. Vishnu, pay attention. Part of it is, and part of it is a little mechanical. When the lecture starts, we have to, mechanical to ourselves and prayerful to Krishna. Dear Krishna, please let me hear this in a way that's going to enter my heart. And mechanical, okay, this is a class and they may, probably everything they say, I need to work on. Whatever, it's humility. Maybe you are the most humble person in the whole room, but there's still more to be done. We're not as humble as Rupa Goswami or Srila Prabhupada, so there's still work to be done. So I think those two things, always, pray to Krishna. Please let the meaning of this instructions enter my heart. Please help me understand how I can apply it to my own self. And then mechanically, make yourself, I really need to hear this because I need to make progress. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we're changing behaviors according to the acharyas and we've been doing stuff maybe for millions of births. That's a long time. So, we live in a highly competitive society. We live in a place where everyone wants to measure everything, and we hold ourselves up against pure devotees. Ravinda Prabhu did some study. There was a person named Anton Boysen, who was a philosopher and a Christian minister, and he started some of the original work on pastoral counseling. And he talked about how different religious traditions, how they have such high expectations, right? No lust, no envy, no greed, everyone's friend, everyone's servant, and how you can respond to that in a healthy way and how unhealthy way. And an unhealthy way in ISKCON sometimes is called you suffer from PDS. You've heard of PDS? Pure devotee syndrome. Yes. You think you're a pure devotee, right? So, and we sometimes pretend we're at a level that we're not at, and better we just try to be a humble servant and hear as best we can. And you have to work at it. I mean, I hear classes sometimes, and I notice, I'm hoping that I have to go, Krishna, please. This is for me. It's for my benefit too. We take her question, or we should start?
Yeah, we can take.
Okay, one more.
So, when we were talking about, the manager thinks that the other person may not be suited, or we know where, which service they are best.
Yeah, the
They are
big problem
not
is they don't
listening.
listen to us, right? We know exactly what's best for them,
so
and they just won't surrender. It's like your kids almost.
right. So then my thought was that maybe I should think that maybe I am not always right. So that's the
Absolutely.
way I'm thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
That it could be another version.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to, Bhakti Vigyan Swami, who's a sannyasi from Russia, very scholarly, I heard him recently describe, he was explaining even being a guru means you're there to facilitate someone's Krishna consciousness. We talk about planting the seed, but Krishna's got a relation with everyone. He's the, right? You should, the Upanishads, right? The two birds are in the tree. So we got this eternal relationship with Krishna. So as devotees, we're trying to facilitate that relationship. So our tendency in the material world is want to control and all. So we have to try to take that back and see that we're really meant to try to help people water the seed. Just like being a parent, like sometimes you hear about, say in the American example, right? The father wanted to be a football star and he got hurt and it never happened. So if his son, from the day he's born, he's going to be a football star. Maybe he's a great musician, but his father's trying to force him into being a football star because that's his need. That's his desire. It happens with moms too, I'm not picking on dads. But we have to be careful of that, I mean, sometimes there may be emergencies, so somebody asks you to, they ask me, can you do the Arctics for a few days? Sure, I can help fill up, but that's not the long-term good for me or Krishna. Like that. So we want to try to help people understand how they can best serve Krishna. In the beginning, maybe it's a little more prescriptive, do this, do this, do this. But as people mature, it's more, what do you like to do for Krishna? How can we help you? Do what you like for Krishna. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody. I'm only here for one day. They heard where I was born and they said, look, you got 24 hours. Get out of town. So I'm going to Cincinnati next and then Indianapolis. It's a kind of a quick Midwest tour. But I really appreciate all of you coming. I know it's Tuesday night and it's not easy.
Thank you. Looking forward for more visiting, and then get to know us and we get to know each other. And, thank you.
Can we do a group photo with you?
Sure.
Anuttama Prabhu ki.
Yeah.
All of you, Keith.
Where is our cameraman?
Cameraman left.
Cameraman left? Oh, I thought he was talking about the kid being.